Hi, Redeemer family. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Redeeming Truth. I'm here today with Pastor Darryl because Christmas, it said, is the most wonderful time of the year. And I'm sure some of us hear that song and are like, oh, I'm so glad it's Christmas time. Other people hear that and are probably become angry or depressed, or I wish it was that. And so those are the people we want to talk to today. But also, if that's not you, we want to equip you to help you talk to those who are really struggling during this time. Not only has it been a year that's out of sorts, a year that's been incredibly difficult. The end of the year has also been incredibly difficult. But for some, it didn't matter. It doesn't matter what year it is. Christmas is going to be hard. And so I wanted to talk to you about it, Darryl, because you have been a pastor for many years. You've walked with people through these things. You have experience with this. And so that's why I thought it would be helpful for the people watching here to hear from you on this subject. And so in your time, I guess, as a pastor, what are some of the most difficult things that people face during this time of year?
It's interesting. Driving down here, I was listening to Amy Grant on the radio singing that Christmas is the most wonderful time in the year. And I was thinking, oh. And you know, it is because people this particular month just seem to be nicer. I don't know what that is, expectation, memory, whatever it might be. But like you said, John, the truth is, it's as life goes on, it begins to start feeling like more like loss. Because even the greater memories that you have, I mean, I just have had some of the greatest Christmases of my life. My two sons now are 47 and 45. Christmas was a lot more fun when they were 7 and 5. And those memories are lost. And so little by little, you know, you see a tree, you have a particular scent, a smell, a memory. And for the moment, you remember, and there's a rejoicing, there's a smile. But then there's the aftertaste of the fact that that's gone. It's lost. Yeah. And so sometimes those who've had the greatest Christmases in the past with family are hurting the most because of loneliness. And Christmas all of a sudden becomes a reminder of loss, a reminder of those times that were such precious moments in your life. But there is something that I know that in my 71 years I've learned to do to go through the times like this.
What's that?
And you would like to know what they might be.
Absolutely. I think everybody would like to know what that is.
Well, for me, it comes down to really two things. The word gratefulness and the word humility. When these times, the darkest times, the lonely times, the times where it's just really, really hard because you do miss things. I usually only quote the scriptures, but this one time I will go ahead and quote Dr. Seuss, who was the one who said, at least in one of his books, that don't be sad because it's over, but be happy that it happened. And in a funny little way, he came across what Solomon said. In Solomon's journal there in the book of Ecclesiastes, this whole issue of gratefulness. At the very end of chapter 5 of Ecclesiastes, he speaks of a man that his heart is so gladdened that the days passing by do not bother him at all. And you look at the context and you want to know, well, what is it that made his heart so gladdened that even the bad days, he just went right through those and they did not cause him to go south emotionally? And the answer is right there in verse 18. It's when he acknowledges that all things have been given him by the hand of God. The first thing I do, John, is I take an audit, an audit about all the things, those memories that God has given me, like Dr. Seuss said. Yeah. I had two sons. I have two sons. Now they're big galoots. But I had that year when they were 7 and 5. I had that year when they were 8 and 6. Yeah. I had that year, you know, when my mom and dad were alive. I had that year when Uncle Bowman and Aunt Zelma came over. You know, I had that year. And sometimes I will just sit and close my eyes and do that audit. And what I mean is I'll go back and I can't relive the moments, but I can remember the aftertaste. Solomon uses the word yatron, which speaks of what is left over after that vaporous event. You know, Christmas goes by real fast. All the wonderful events in our life go by real quickly. And some may last for a moment, some for a week, some for a month. But then when they're over, they're over. But what's left over is what Solomon calls yatron. That's what is left over to enjoy. I call it the aftertaste. And God gives us an ability to remember. And I believe, at least the older I get, that you can actually go back and rehearse the aftertaste. You can go back. I can close my eyes and go back to those times that I remember and actually rehearse the emotion, the experience, if I take the time to do that. So the first thing on gratefulness, it's interesting. Gratefulness is when we acknowledge what God has given us, and it's been given to us by his hand. Then Solomon says he does this very strange thing. The Hebrew word is shalat. And the word shalat means he empowers us to be able to extract enjoyment from what it is that we're experiencing, whatever gift. If I gave you a gift of a free dinner at Ruth Chris, that would be great unless that morning you went to the dentist and had your teeth pulled. Then the gift becomes a curse. There's two parts to the gift. There's the gift itself, and then there's that capacity to extract the enjoyment from the gift. Well, the gift passes, and then if I'm just focusing on all the things that were wonderful, the gifts themselves, they're gone. And that leaves me with this sense of loss, this sense of loneliness and regret, sadness. But the yatron, the memory is still there and is available to me if I am grateful. And if I acknowledge, and I do this audit in my mind of the wonderful memories that I've had, then what God does is he shalats me. He literally empowers me to extract enjoyment, empowers me to be able to go back and enjoy those moments all over again. So the first thing is gratefulness. The second thing is humility. You know, around this time of year, it's so easy to throw those parties. I'm talking about the pity parties, the one that nobody comes to. It's the one on the invitation that says, come, enter into my misery with me. You'll have a good time. And people normally don't go to those parties. And those who do, maybe because they're really loyal to you, I promise you one thing, they're not enjoying them. They're not enjoying them. And that's when the eyeballs are turned inward. You know, I think of what Paul writes, who was a student of Solomon in Ecclesiastes. He had studied that years before. But in Philippians, remember when Paul talks about the fact that he's learned to be content. He says in everything, you know, I've learned that I have everything I need right now to enjoy my life. But the attitude he gave that in chapter 2 of Philippians, when he said, have this mind in you that was in Christ, and then in the previous 2 verses, he tells you exactly what it was. And he said, make my joy complete by having this mind of humility. And what is that? He goes on to explain. Is to be concerned about the interests of others is more important than your own. Now, that's really, really hard. You know, you say, well, what about me? Well, that's the problem. If I'm all absorbed with what about me, that's the problem with hopelessness, is it gets all absorbed with me. What's going to happen to me? What about me? But the essence of humility is when I forget me and I trust me to the hands of God, that I'm content. He'll take care of me. He'll bring into my life whatever I need to enjoy my life. Meanwhile, I'm freed up from that selfishness, that self-absorption, to really be concerned about the interests of others, more important than my own. And in a very practical way, when I feel, you know, the darkest times around the Christmas seasons, that's when I get out there and serve others. I start focusing on people who are hurting, people that I can give gifts to, I can go visit, I can spend some time with, I can just call on the phone and pray with them, see how they're doing what I call perspective checks, you know, on them. And I would love to say I'm doing it because I'm so selfless and so loving of people. Well, I hope that's part of it. But the truth is, most of it is to get my eyes off myself. To just in humility consider the interests of others as more important than my own. So those are the 2 things that I know this is hard counsel, because when you're hurting, you kind of don't want to hear what I'm telling you. But I promise you this from the Word of God, that when over the next few days, the next weeks, and you are really hurting, feeling alone, feeling abandoned, just feeling hurt, the way you crawl out of that hole is first, take that audit. Acknowledge what God has given you from his hand over the years. And then let him go ahead and gladden your heart by shalotting you. Good way to remember the word shalot is just say, God, thanks, shalot. In other words, just let him shalot you by bringing back the yatron, that aftertaste of those wonderful memories, and take some time by yourself even, or with some loved ones, remembering those wonderful gifts that God gladdens your heart and gives you the yatron and shalots you so that you can actually embrace and go back and rehearse. And again, like good old Dr. Zeus said, don't be sad that it's over. Be happy that it happened. And then with that attitude of humility, from gratefulness to humility, focus on others. Don't throw the pity parties. Like I said, nobody comes to them anyway. And so go to the parties of others. And you're going to find that then God will indeed create that contentment within your own heart that you really don't need anything else to enjoy your season.
So talk to the person right now, or take that teaching and then apply it to the person who's thinking, yeah, but I'm going to a Christmas dinner that I would rather, I don't know, slit my wrists than go to this thing because it's going to be contentious. It's going to be, there's going to be anger there. There's going to, talk to that person. Like, how do they prepare themselves before that? And then how do they exist in it? Taking some of the things you said and then applying it to that situation.
Well, I find, as a follower of Jesus, I examine through the Gospels his pattern, especially in the Gospel of John. How did he respond in intimate relationships? And I found that he was always very gracious to the multitude, and he would speak truth to the multitude and respond to the multitude. But when it came to the deep teachings, the deep intimate interactions, like in Matthew 24, when he's talking about the future of the world, he only shares that in Matthew 24 with Peter, James, and John. So the application to that is I'm at the dinner table, I'm going over to that person's home, and as long as you try to entertain and relate to everybody, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. So be gracious. Proverbs 15:1 says, "A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger." So keep your voice down. And that gentle answer is just rise above the contention and just give a gracious answer, But then what do you do for yourself? Focus on one or two people that you do have a great affection for, or at least that they're responsive to you. And I have no problem. Many times, if I'm at a gathering, they'll say, where's Pastor Darryl? Oh, he's over there in the corner talking to that person. And you kind of say, well, isn't that horrible? No, because what happens is at least people know I'm not unfriendly. If I was over in the corner reading a book or playing with my cell phone, that's a different story. But when people can see that you are caring and loving and interactive and interested in another person, even if it's just one or two other people, then it seems like they'll leave you alone, quite frankly, because they'll know that it's not because you're snooty or you're above anybody, and they'll release you. And so you get your enjoyment from the interaction from just the one or two. Be gracious to everyone around the table, but focus on the one or two. That's what's going to bring you your joy.
One last question. How would you encourage a Christian to keep the focus on Christ during a time when it's very difficult to keep your focus on Christ because there's so many other things going on? How would you encourage them to keep the main thing during this time of year?
I find that the greatest danger we fall into is we get preachy, and then we get really formalized. And so we start thinking about formally, okay, how do I share the gospel? How do I make sure these people understand they're sinners and they need forgiveness and that there's judgment coming? And so the truth is, that's such a frightening interaction, a frightening thing to do, even in our flesh, that we actually permit ourselves to be susceptible to distractions and never get to it. I find that if we just speak our gospel, speak our spiritual life, our soul, as naturally, as free as we speak about anything else, so that we're not offensive, we're not judging. It's that Matthew 7, it's not about, I'm well aware about the log in my own eye. And so when I'm with people, especially that situation, how I keep the main thing, is I'm always, focusing on their soul. You just got to look at people's eyes, and you can see, I don't overstate this, but sadness. I mean, you can see the sadness. And when you look in their eyes and you see the sadness, that just, for me, connects me to their soul. Yeah. And when I'm connected to their soul, I can talk about, as simple as saying, wow, it's been a hard year for you. But I want to really pray. I know it's been a hard year for all of us. I don't know about you, but I don't know what I'd do without God. Or I wouldn't know about you, but, the presence of Christ in my life. Or sometimes I just feel so overwhelmed I don't know what to do. And I'm so glad that I follow Jesus. And his commands are important to me. I guess that's the greatest Christmas gift that I have. How about you? What are some of the gifts you're going to get this year? In other words, we don't snag them. We don't trick them. Yeah. We just bring our faith in Jesus Christ and our sense of God's presence just naturally into our conversation. Yeah. If that be the case, then you're not afraid to do it. And so you're not going to find yourself so distracted from doing the hard thing, because it's not the hard thing anymore.
Yeah. So there are people watching right now who maybe have presents to buy, presents to wrap, food to make, company parties to go to, children's recitals. Maybe those have already happened. But, there's so much going on at this time. And then what I found is that, I'll just speak to me personally, I get to the end of all that, and it's maybe December 27th, and I go, gosh, where was Jesus in all of that? I know I preached the Christmas Eve service, so I helped other people get the focus on Christ, at least for a little bit. But in the overall thing, here we are celebrating his birthday, and it seems like he gets lost and all of his other stuff. And so help me not to lose him during this time.
Well, first I would say, don't let it become something legalistic to you. Mm-hmm. The remarkable thing about the birthday of Jesus is he celebrates his birthday by giving the gifts. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then he expects us to celebrate his birthday not by giving him gifts, but by going ahead and passing gifts on. And so many times you may be actually celebrating Christ throughout Christmas and not really acknowledging the fact that you're doing that. Yeah. Because Christ-likeness is so much part of your life. Mm-hmm. It's the way you talk. It's the fact you give these gifts. Mm-hmm. You remember when the Apostle Paul was walking there in Greece and he saw all the idols. Now, he could have kind of been distracted by all the idols. He could have condemned all the idols of the Greeks. But remember, he sees the one idol, the one for the unknown God. Yeah. And instead of jumping all over them and kind of doing the legalistic, bad me, my bad, rather what he does is he says, let me share with you. Let me take this, in his perspective, this empty idol and fill it with truth. And so it's not so much, wow, I got to go to this dinner, I got to go to this play. Well, you go to this play, you're loving your kid if your kid's in the play. And in great pain, you're loving everybody else's kid as well, because you wait 20 minutes before your kid does his 2 minutes. But then you're loving everybody's kid. That's Christ-likeness. You're giving gifts to Aunt Zelma and Uncle Bowman, and you don't even like them, But Jesus, Romans 5, God loved us while we were yet sinners. In other words, you're doing the faith. Now, you're taking the empty, what the world would call Christmas and gifts and dinners and parties, but you're filling those with the truth, just like Paul filled the idol to the unknown God with truth. And if you just view it that way, lighten up on yourself. Let the Christmas spirit realize that you don't have to be talking Jesus, talking God for it to be real. Matter of fact, for it to really be real, you probably don't talk too much about it. You're just living it out. When you're asked, I think of 1 Peter 3:15, do not be intimidated. But he says, sanctify Christ as your Lord. Sanctify, set apart Christ as your Lord by always being ready to give an apologia. That's the Greek word. Not apology, although we get the word apology from it, but means it's a legal term of defense, a reason. So always give a reason for and then not for Christianity. You're not God's defense attorney, but for the hope that lies within you. Yeah. So always be ready while you're giving this gift to Aunt Zelma, while you're giving this gift to Uncle Bowman. How come you're giving this to me? Well, Uncle Bowman, because you bear the image of God and you're worth Jesus Christ to the Father. That makes you important, and I want to honor that importance. Well, after Uncle Bowman gets off the ground, the fact is just natural. Right. And have some fun with it.
That's great. Well, I hope that's been helpful for you. I hope that's been a blessing. I know it has been for me, just sitting here. And so I would encourage you, if you haven't done it already, please subscribe to our podcast so that you know when these things go out. They come into your feed every time that happens. We typically try to drop them on Fridays, but this was a special one we wanted to get out to you as soon as possible. So thanks for watching, and we will see you next time on Redeeming Truth.